Thank you all for coming out. My apologies for being late. I had some breaking developments in another case I'll speak about in just a moment. First, I'd like to, on behalf of the entire JSO family, extend our sympathy to Detective White's family and all our brother and sister officers at Clay County Sheriff's Office. Our thoughts and prayers certainly go out with them at this time. I'd like to clear up a little bit of confusion that the media had yesterday with two calls on Jacksonville's south side that were reported as being related, but they are not. So I'd like to go through those just to clarify those issues. Yesterday afternoon, about 3:20 p.m., there was a bank robbery at 12,689 San Jose Boulevard. That bank was robbed. The suspect in the case entered that bank, displayed a handgun, robbed two tellers in the bank, and then fled that bank in a car. That car headed north on San Jose Boulevard. Description of the car was put out, and officers who were in the area saw the car, actually engaged in a pursuit with that car up San Jose Boulevard, onto 295, up to 95, and then off on J2B, J. Turner Butler Boulevard. The suspect's vehicle exited on Hodges Boulevard. The suspect, once he stopped the car, he got out of the car with a gun pointing to his head, demanding that the officers shoot him. We had approximately 10 officers or so who were at this final location. The subject in this case was refusing to cooperate. We negotiated with him for a good 10-15 minutes, advising him to put the gun down. He finally, after, like I say, about 10 or 15 minutes, did comply with us. He put the gun down, and that issue was resolved safely. That created, obviously, a pretty large traffic jam in the area. On or around that same time, an unrelated, completely separate incident happened at the Smart Pharmacy at 1650 San Pablo Road. The victim in the case that was reported from San Pablo Road was at the pharmacy filling a prescription for oxycodone pills. He was meeting some other parties to sell part of the prescription that he was having filled because he didn't have enough money to pay for those prescription pills. Once he got there, the other parties who were there to take their half of the pills, he fled in another vehicle, leaving them without the pills that they had paid the money for. The people who he was supposed to give the pills to then went to the car that he was in, was able to break the window of the car that he was in, forcibly extract him from the car, beat him, carry him and kidnap him, placing him in their car. They fled the scene of the pharmacy, and because of the traffic jam that was created by the bank robbery incident before, they got stopped in traffic, just like many other people in the south side did. The description of that vehicle was put out by the victim's friend who was actually following the car. The officers in that area were able to find that vehicle, locate that vehicle, and put that to a quick resolution. And again, this case and the bank robbery case are completely separate, although they're reported as being similar. Now, there was a citizen journalist who uploaded the video to YouTube yesterday who identified that as being a JSO police takedown. That was an actual video of the crime occurring. No officers were involved in that. That was the actual crime of the kidnapping that occurred. So I want to make sure that it's clear to the public and to the media that those two issues are not related in any way. So that being clear, I want to cover, if I can, the Regency Mall shooting from last week. Last week, in the evening, Friday afternoon, there was a shooting at the mall. That's been well reported. We arrested a Keith Brown in that case. We now know that Mr. Brown is not responsible for that shooting. Just now, we are in the process of arresting another individual, Joshua Davis, 19-year-old black male, for that shooting. Although Mr. Brown was identified not only by the victim in the case, but the victim's friend who was with him, and an independent witness at Belk who identified Keith Brown as the shooter, we believe that those were inaccurate identifications. Our investigations don't stop the minute we make an arrest. We're continually working through information. This case was significant. The incident investigation continued through the weekend, has continued through this week. We have now learned and have a confession from Mr. Davis that he was the responsible party from the shooting at Regency Square. He is in the process of being arrested now. Booking photo and his information will be forwarded to you electronically after the press conference. I can answer a few questions about any one of these three incidents, if anybody has any.
I have a question about negotiations just with the bank robbery. Is that something every officer is trained to do, or was that, how do you handle that when you have someone claiming they're going to take their own life and there's a gun, and I know you guys had your guns drawn? It's a very dangerous situation, but you guys were able to talk them down. Is that part of your training, or?
A hostage negotiation, a formalized training for hostage negotiation is not something that every officer has. We like to think that every officer out here is very well versed in common sense and discipline. This is something that they employed. Like I said, there was a good 10 officers out there. We remained with our firearms trained on this man when he was making these threats, because a suicidal person could be a homicidal person. However, the discipline was there and employed. It's employed by all our officers in all the cases. Yesterday afternoon was just another example of a successful resolution that we seek in all the cases. The individual who had the gun on himself was in charge of that scene. He made the decision. When he made the decision to put the gun down, it was over. It kind of highlights, as does the incident last night in Clay County, our job is extremely dangerous, extremely volatile. Every situation that we come in contact with is an unknown. Every traffic stop we go to, every call we go to, every house we enter, it involves a firearm, because we carry one there. They're dangerous, things are dangerous. We are trained to handle those. We act accordingly to our training. The bank robbery yesterday was a good example of that. As was catching the kidnapping suspect. That's just how things go.
Yeah, with the kidnapping, since the victim, is he going to face any charges, since it was kind of like a drug deal gone wrong? Is everybody responsible?
That case is not over with yet. The actual victim in the case yesterday was arrested on a warrant. The kidnappers were arrested, and that information will be forwarded to you electronically too, of who's responsible for that. The actual investigation into the case, where the victim's involvement with some of his dealings. Obviously, this was not a complete legitimate thing that the victim was doing. That's not done yet. So.
And what was the charge on that victim?
The charge of the victim, I'll forward that. It was an arrest warrant that he was arrested on yesterday afternoon. Yes, sir.
In reference to the Regency Square shooting, does Mr. Davis say why he committed the shooting in the first place, or?
It's an ongoing dispute that he and the victim have for some time. So he just happened to be in the right or wrong place at the right or wrong time, depending on how you look at it. He elected to do that in a public place, extremely dangerous, as you can well imagine. But that just was happenstance that he just happened to be at the same shoe store that the victim happened to be in.
Do you typically bring the victim back in to identify this person that has confessed to the shooting at Regency?
That's part of what we'll do investigatively. The victim initially, like I said, he identified the Keith Brown as the person who shot him. So what we're looking into, just still some of those things, working with the state attorney's office with how we proceed forward with the initial case that when an arrest was made, and then another person who has confessed to this case has been arrested. So that part is still well in the works right now, as a matter of fact.
And I know the original shooting of the mall, they were looking for 3 individuals. Obviously, you have 2 names. Is there a third still out there, or what's?
We believe at this point in time, everybody who was involved, either coming or going with that group of 3, is identified and has been talked to.
Anybody?
Anybody
with the kidnapping, so I know there was a big confusion as far as what was released to the media. Can you kind of go into the complications of that? We were hearing it wasn't a kidnapping, it was.
Some of the confusion, I really believe, came with the posting of that YouTube video. And again, obviously the internet being what it is, and people with cell phones and cameras and video recorders on their cell phone have the ability, just as occurred yesterday afternoon, to post those on there. There is, without explanation, as those things get posted, as did happen yesterday, I believe some assumptions were made by some outlets. We attempted to clarify that. Some confusion still existed. Thus, I'm here today to try to make sure that the 2 incidents are clear, that they're not related, completely separate. We work very diligently to make sure the information we give is accurate, timely, and this is, again, an attempt to do that, to make sure it's clear.
Anybody?
Anybody else? Thank you all for coming.